All right, ISO 230 Fundamental Emergency Management FEMA Lesson 4 Emergency Management Roles. Lesson 2, you learned about importance involved with the whole community with emergency management. The lesson describes each personal role with more detail. At the completion of this mission, the lesson, you should be able to describe the role of local emergency manager, describe how the private sector and government organizations participate with emergency management, describe the tribal and territorial role of emergency management, discuss state role in emergency management, describe community member role in emergency management, discuss federal role of emergencies and major emergencies and disasters. This lesson should take approximately 1 hour to complete.
Disasters disrupt people's lives, making them feel vulnerable and depriving them of the services they rely upon. At a time of crisis, the community turns to its local government for assurance that preparations have been made to manage the incident and that their lives will return to normal as quickly as possible, with a minimum of inconvenience.
Whenever there's an emergency, the population expects you to step up and be a leader. Now, the question is whether or not you want to accept that role. Because when you raise that hand and take that oath of office, I don't think you ever anticipate that, wow, this other situation may happen that's going to necessitate that I do something a little more in depth than what I did in taking that oath.
Mayor Holden's leadership was tested in August 2005 when Hurricane Katrina struck Louisiana. When the levees in New Orleans collapsed, 200,000 people moved into Baton Rouge. What happened 3 years later with Hurricane Gustav was even worse.
Probably the biggest, at least in the last few years, would have to be Gustav. Certainly the most impacting tropical event for the Baton Rouge area since 1965's Betsy. We saw more damage here in Gustav than we did in Andrew, even though maybe on a national scale, Andrew is a more noteworthy storm.
During a time of crisis, Mayor Holden knew that the people of Baton Rouge expected to hear from him.
I think the people expect for you to give them guidance. People expect for you to carry out basic services like fire, police, EMS. People expect you to deal with flooding. If there's a flood there. People expect you to deal with whatever disaster that has come up in an economical way, making sure they are still able to carry on with their lives and their businesses as much as possibly can. But they really look to you to give them some comfort, give them advice, and also do the job to make their lives a lot easier.
Public safety has always been a #1 priority here in Baton Rouge, and that shows from the team that we've put together.
Whenever it comes down to the police department, people want to be confident that if the lights go out in an area, that they're still safe.
In emergency situations, it's good to have a close relationship with your city departments so everything can get back to normal as quick as possible.
Fire department also, especially if you have electrical lines falling down. They have to work with our Department of Public Works.
The Department of Public Works will maintain the infrastructure so people can move on with their life as they know it. And in emergencies, usually you will lose services, and the quicker you can get services back up and running, the better for everyone.
You need to look at your private stakeholders, your nonprofit entities, your military personnel, your other partners that, non-traditional kind of partners, innovative ways to be able to complement limited resources with some outside of what you normally would consider.
The business community is looking for ways to make sure they can keep themselves going as well. If there are no utilities, then they have a problem. They're also concerned about their employees getting to work. So if the employees don't show up, there's a problem. Then you have to make sure that we do not do anything that will adversely impact them. So it boils down to a team working together to make sure that we're still vibrant, because you still have an economy to deal with. And so if the businesses are down, then the bottom line at the end of the month for any city, any parish, or any county is going to be your tax revenues are down.
It's really, really important to have the community engaged in the process because, government can't do everything for everyone.
Alright, chief elected and appointed officials. Chief elected and appointed officials must clearly understand the role of the responsible, successful emergency management response at the times these roles may require providing direction guidance of the constitutes during the next incident on an ongoing basis. The elected and appointed officials may be called upon to help shape and modify law, policies, budgets to aid in preparedness of efforts to improve the emergency management and response capabilities. Major city managers, county officials, the tribal leaders may also ultimately be responsible for the emergency management activities described in the next screen. Depending on state and local statute, the responsibility authorities vary, with the jurisdiction and responsibilities are often delegated to an emergency manager if permitted by the statutes. Role in local, the emergency management, the manager is emergency for the disaster local and are handled locally by first responders and emergency management. Local emergency managers have responsibility to coordinate all components of the emergency management program. Activities for community include managing resources before, during, and after major emergency disaster, conducting activities related to key components of emergency management, coordinating with all partners in emergency management process. We'll go to the managing resources before, during, and after major emergency disaster. Major emergency manage resources before and during and after major emergency disasters. Take inventory of personal material resources, include with the private sector resources that would be available to the emergency. Identify resource deficiencies, working appropriate officials and on measuring to resolve them, developing and carrying out public awareness and education programs. Conducting activities related with the key components of emergency management, coordinate planning, profitable work, cooperative with the organization, government agencies, identify with the analyze potential impact of the heads of threat and jurisdiction, conduct threat, hazard, and risk assessment, coordinate review of local emergency disaster-related authorities, recommended amendments, and when necessary. Coordinating with all parties of the emergency management process to ensure they are aware of potential threats to the community that include establishing system alert official with the public emergency disaster, participate in mitigation prevention activities, planning emergency disaster, even the all has with approach to industrial, including establishing, maintaining networks, expert advise of the damage such as all has to operate effectively in emergency situation, conduct effective recovery operations after disaster, and advise of the informed emergency management activities. Local Emergency Management Coordinator. It is important for the local emergency management role build relationship with the partners' emergency management systems to ensure the whole community is prepared with the partners include fire services, public law and law enforcement services, emergency management programs, public health, public works, voluntary organization, private and nonprofit sector organization, other groups involved with emergency activities, citizen, tribal territory leaders, local emergency managers must devote significant time and energy coordinate with a variety of people and organization within the outside community. Cornerstone Local Response Home Rule and Dillon's Rule. Corner State Local Response with the Home Rule and the Dillon's Rule. State grant authorities, local government to the grant govern its own affairs through Home Rule and Dillon's Rule. Although major states for the use Dillon's Rule, it should not. Majority of states use the Dillon Rule. It should be noted that your authority derived with the state sovereignty as delegated power. It is important to learn which rules apply to the jurisdiction. Home Rule. Home Rule is delegation power of the state and subunit of the government. Home Rule creates the local autonomy, limits the degree of the state influence in local affairs. Dillon's Rule. Dillon's Rule is derived with a written decision of Judge John F. Dillon in Iowa in 1968. The Dillon's Rule is used in interpreting state law with a question whether or not local government has a certain power. Role of tribal leader. Tribal leaders responsible for the public safety and welfare of the people of the tribe. Authorized by the tribal government, the tribal leader can coordinate the tribal resource with the need to prevent, protect against, mitigate against, prepare, respond to, recover for the incidents, all types, amend, suspend certain tribal law of the ordinance associated with emergency management, communicate with the tribal council for the community, help people with the business, organize, cope with the consequences of any type of the incident, negotiate mutual and aid and assistance agreements with the other tribes and jurisdictions, request federal assistance, declarations after the Stafford Act through the government and state with a direct request for the president when it becomes clear that the tribal capabilities insufficient have been exceeded. Elected deal directly with the federal government, federal departments, or agencies that work directly for the tribe with an existing authority within resources. Role within the community. The following partners play a critical emergency management role before, during, and after emergency and ensure the appropriate response. Individual citizens, community citizens, and voluntary organization, private industry. The partners involved with the start include with the planning to ensure that the emergency occurs that everyone understands their role and ready to contribute without delay. Individual citizens. Individual citizens who can take up themselves, their family, and their neighbors contribute to the freeing of the people, resources to help them, those that must need. Communities and citizens. Community and citizens contribute to taking the time necessary over the time of the emergency, likely to occur with a prepared emergency kit and emergency plan. Volunteer established organization that receive the training before emergency occurs, take direction, respond, responsible to alert warnings and other public information. Voluntary organizations. Voluntary organizations contribute to training, managing volunteer resources, identifying shelter location needs supply, providing critical emergency service supply for those who need, with the cleaning of supplies, so cleaning food, shelter, assisting with the post-emergency cleanup, identifying those who need have not been met, or coordinated assistance. Private industry. Private industry contributes to providing technical assistance in such manner, utilities, and engineering, participate to develop the training with the exercise of the emergency plan, with the working with emergency management personnel before emergency occur, with a certain whatever assistance that may be necessary, how they can help. Provide assistance include volunteers, support emergency management during an emergency throughout the recovery process. Roles of state emergency management. The state role is to supplement with the facility with the local efforts of the before, during, and after the emergency, coordinate with the integrated with the resource of applying with the local need of the state, must prepare to maintain accelerate service to provide new and serve with the local governments for the local capability with the fall short of the demand of the state, coordinates with local government to meet the emergency needs, assess if it's available to state and federal resources that have the local government's guidance with assistance to apply with acquire and use state federal resource effectively. State roles of the governor. The state and the governor found with emergency management responsibility with an issue with the state emergency state or area emergency declaration based on the damage estimates and initiate state response action, personal materials, etc. Activities emergency contingency fund reallocates regular budgets for emergency activities, oversee emergency management, request disperse monitoring federal assistance for state government, or only government can request federal aid that comes from the President's declaration. State roles and emergency management agency. State emergency management agency carries out the statewide emergency activities, help coordinate emergency management activities involved in more than one community, assist individual communities when needed, to provide financial assistance supplement based on the process application review, identify response, recover the resource of the repair with critical infrastructure, to dispatch personnel with the scene, assist the response recovery efforts, coordinate emergency planning or EOP, and request federal assistance. Alright, requesting federal assistance, and we're going to watch the video.
The federal government maintains a wide array of capabilities and resources. Perhaps the most widely known authority under which federal assistance is provided for major incidents is the Stafford Act. In fact, federal disaster assistance is often thought of as synonymous with presidential declarations and the Stafford Act. However, federal assistance under the Stafford Act is only available when the incident exceeds state, tribal, and local resources. In those circumstances, a governor or tribal chief executive may ask the president to declare an emergency or major disaster. Before a declaration request is made, the state or tribal emergency plan must be activated, and all appropriate state, tribal, and local actions must have been taken or initiated. Examples of these actions include surveying the affected areas to determine the extent of private and public damage, and conducting joint preliminary damage assessments with FEMA officials to estimate the types and extent of federal disaster assistance required. The declaration request is made through the FEMA Regional Administrator and includes information on the extent and nature of state or tribal resources that have been or will be used, a certification by the governor or tribal chief executive that state, tribal, and local governments will assume all applicable non-federal costs required by the Stafford Act, an estimate of the types and amounts of supplementary federal assistance required, and, for state requests, designation of the state coordinating officer. The FEMA Regional Administrator evaluates the damage and requirements for federal assistance and makes a recommendation to the FEMA Administrator. The FEMA Administrator, acting through the Secretary of Homeland Security, then recommends a course of action to the President. In extraordinary circumstances, the President may unilaterally make such a declaration to expedite the delivery of life-saving assistance. Under the Stafford Act, Title 3, 42 U.S.C. 5143, following a presidential declaration, the President appoints a federal coordinating officer to execute Stafford Act authorities. The Federal Coordinating Officer represents the President in the field and uses the structures and process specified in the National Response Framework to manage the response. While the Stafford Act may be the most familiar mechanism for federal support, it is not the only one. Often, federal assistance does not require coordination by the Department of Homeland Security and can be provided without a presidential emergency or major disaster declaration. In these instances, federal departments and agencies provide assistance to states, as well as directly to tribes and local jurisdictions, consistent with their own authorities.
All right, the role of the President of the United States. The head of the executive branch, federal government, the President of the United States, is responsible for protecting the public, making emergency and disaster declaration for the governor, request the federal funds and related aid and disaster surveys. Survivors provided public assistance, make declaration unique authority for some circumstances and events on the federal property. Role of the federal government. The federal government promotes the development and sustainment of the capability across all mission areas. The assistance of the federal government may take form of the official report to take assistance with training, information about materials, personal research of the research. The federal government provides legislation, executive order, regulations through influence all emergency management activities. Also maintains the largest pool of official research of the consistent delivery capabilities. Federal government role and responsibility. Incident happened role the responsible to clear define national response framework, including the emergency support functions. Describe the role responsible for the Florida federal department and agencies for the federal resistance and some of the emergency support functions. Our primary agency, support agency, and emergency support function coordinator. Read the primary agencies. Primary agency. The national response framework identifies primary agencies based on authorities, resources, and capabilities. Supporting agencies are assigned based on resource capabilities in a given functional area. And the emergency support function coordinator. Emergency support function coordinator agent designated the emergency support function coordinator has ongoing responsibility across the prevention, protection, response, recovery, mitigation mission areas. Emergency management for the particular emergency support function. Emergency support function coordinated agency that is responsible for the ongoing planning, preparedness, other activities. Federal government and FEMA's role. The Federal Emergency Management Agency takes the lead role of the preparedness major crisis that has support with the role in partner state and local, tribal, territorial emergency management partnership. FEMA provides technical assistance, financial assistance, state, tribal, territorial, local governments to upgrade with the communication warning system. Operation Emergency Information Coordinated Center that provides certain locations for the collection management of the disaster emergency information. Provides information to the President concerning the matters of the national interest and help with the decision of the disaster declarations. Activates federal emergency support functions. Our emergency management partnership roles. All right, emergency management functional group. The integrated approach to emergency management enable the effective coordination at all levels of emergency operations centers may help achieve the fully following functional groups to support the field operation policy group, coordination group, field response group. Should be noted that the structure is not making tactical decisions, should not be confused with the incident command system policy group. Policy group. This informal and flexible grouping of experience with the public official, with the representative of the state and county, tribal, and municipal governments. Coordination group. Coordinate the group member of the staff function coordinate with the type of the number of the personnel, material, the reach of the deployed, providing logistics support with the field operation contract with the relief of the force, carefully monitoring both immediate emergency situation and other threats. The field response group. This group includes fire, law enforcement, medical, military, and public works units that normally would be on scene on the incident. Alright, case study emergency management coordination video.
As you watch this case study, take note of the resources and actions so that you can answer a series of questions. A tornado caused massive property damage and loss of life along its path. Casualties included 36 fatalities, 273 injured, and property damage estimated over $300 million. After the tornado, the first priority was search and rescue to assist the injured and find missing people. The second priority was to care for people and identify those needing shelter and other assistance. Local agencies responded quickly to assist the injured and find missing people, joined by county and state agencies coordinated through the Emergency Operations Center. Among the agencies involved in the response, 3 fire and rescue services from the affected areas coordinated with 26 other fire departments to assist with search and rescue and emergency medical support. The County Sheriff's Department and the City Police Department were the primary responding agencies, assisted by numerous other local and state agencies. The County Transportation Department and the City Sanitation Department provided public works support. In total, more than 35 agencies, departments, and organizations provided personnel to coordinate the response and recovery efforts at the County Emergency Operations Center. In addition, many community-based, faith-based, and volunteer groups provided assistance, including shelter, mass care, mental health, donated goods and services, and animal rescue and care. The State Emergency Management Agency coordinated state assistance that included the National Guard, Public Safety, the State Department of Transportation, and the State Forestry Commission. FEMA provided disaster and community relations teams, established disaster recovery centers to assist survivors seeking assistance, and held applicant briefings for jurisdictions that suffered damage to their infrastructure.
Alright, case study question 103. How did FEMA coordinate individual public assistance with disaster community relations applicant? FEMA region requested President declare disaster. Local emergency management requested President declare a disaster. State government requested that President That's correct. It was the governor that requested President declare a disaster. Alright, instruction. Answer the question based on the case study of the representative done and submit. And select for the correct statement below. All right, lesson 4, summary. Lesson describe the different role of the key department in emergency management. Include local emergency management with the private sector, the non-governmental organization, tribal leaders, the state, with the community member, the federal government. Next lesson, you will learn importance of developing emergency operation planning. Lesson 5, overview emergency operation plan. Cut the tape there.